awkward situation going on with the Canadian national team. And it has nothing to do with the U.S. for a change. No way. This is one of my favorite topics. It's always the big bad clubs that run the world, threatening everybody with doom and death and destruction. And one of those clubs is Bayern, right? We're talking about a club that has once, in its past, threatened the national team of the country that it played in to pull its players out if a particular player didn't start in Manuel Neuer. Now, I don't know how far they were ever going to go with acting on that, but that was something that was said and has always blown my mind. And you know what? Manuel Neuer stayed the starter for the German national team. It was in a period where he was, that weird period where Neuer wasn't quite as good as he has now returned to being in a lot of ways, injuries and all that stuff. Well, Bayern is not afraid to throw its weight around in more areas than just the German national team, much the same way that Real Madrid will throw its weight around to try to get whatever it wants. But normally I'm siding against those big clubs. Today, we're breaking new ground because today I am siding with the big club. Zealand, how could you? You defend the little guy. You're the knight in shining armor, leading forehead first like a battering ram of justice. I know, that's what you're thinking. Well, I think Bayern's probably in the right on this one. I don't know if you've heard the news, but it's actually very, very big news in CONCACAF, very, very big news in the Champions League and everywhere else. But Canadian superstar Alphonso Davies has torn his ACL. And he tore his ACL playing in the Nations League Final Four, which is a big deal in CONCACAF. This is when really all the best national teams get together and you get full call-ups. Sometimes the Gold Cup, which is the championship of CONCACAF, you don't get the A teams, you get the B or the C teams. Well, the CONCACAF Nations League Final Four, you always get the A teams, which was great for the United States because we finished 4th out of 4, losing to Panama and Canada. But in that process, Canada also had, obviously, some really heartbreaking news. But it's the way that it unfolded that has set Bayern on the warpath. So I'm going to give you a timeline here. In the first game, Canada plays against Mexico. Now, I have detailed to you the circle of suck in CONCACAF, which is the United States beats Mexico, Mexico beats Canada, Canada beats the United States. That's the circle of suck, right? The reason the U.S. finished 4th in the Nations League is we had to play against Panama, who is outside the circle of suck, but always beats us. And we didn't get to play Mexico, who we always beat. And so that, we would have won the thing if we got to play Mexico. Instead, Mexico ends up winning the whole thing. But Canada, unfortunately, gets drawn against Mexico, the team they always seemingly lose to unless they're playing inside of a snowdrift, which they did do in World Cup qualifying. And it did work. They beat Mexico outside in January. Genius strategy. But in that match, Alphonso Davies picks up what is described initially as a minor knock. Okay. I want to be clear, there is no available information right now that says that knock even had necessarily anything to do with the ACL that he ended up tearing. And I certainly don't know if it was already torn after that, right? Alphonso Davies was walking off the field. Of course, he did his interviews with the Canadian media, and he said that he was, let's see if I can find the quote here, but he essentially said that he was fine. Also, thank you, Leon Imber and Sebastian Stafford-Bloor. The Athletic did excellent work on this story, kind of getting the quotes and organizing everything together. Right there it is. He just said he was good. He said he was good. Said basically, hey, look, I'm fine. It's going to be all right. Jesse Marsh, who's the coach of the Canadian team, said I think he's just a little bit concerned about it. I think it's more precautionary than anything, and also described the injury as not, or saying he didn't think that the injury was too bad, right? So there was not a lot of alarmist stuff going on after that opening match against Mexico. Canada loses by a goal. Mexico advances to the final, and that means Canada is headed to the 3rd place game to take on the United States of America, which is an unforeseen showdown between two bordering nations that have a serious rivalry athletically, but a rivalry that is now developing in the football world as Canada has kind of joined the U.S. and Mexico as a really competent national team in North America. And, the U.S. and Canada matches have been really contentious and really exciting recently. Obviously, the political climate has contributed to that. It'd be dumb to think that it hasn't. But even before that, the energy and the intensity for those types of matches, and Canada wanting to go out there and beat the United States, and the United States wanting to continue to like little brother Canada, that whole atmosphere it's been great. And Canada has actually owned us the last couple of times. But the lead up to that match was where the issue lies for Alphonso Davies. Because as the match approaches, according to certain people around Alphonso Davies, they think he's not going to be in the starting 11. And one of those certain people is the manager, not the manager, the agent. Okay, the agent for Alphonso Davies, who is Nadal Hussein. Now, Nadal Hussein, besides being apparently very good at clay court tennis, is a vocal agent and has gone out and spoken a lot about the incident that just happened with the Canadian national team. And that is why we have all of this information. And I'll read a lot of the statement that Hussein gave to One Soccer, which is Canada's broadcaster for this stuff. I'm very disappointed. Alphonso was not 100% after the Mexico game, and it was planned that he was not going to start against the U.S. On Saturday night, the expectation was he would not be in the 11. As a captain, I feel he was pressured to start the game by the coach. Yo! That is seriously weighty. That is a seriously weighty accusation. The idea that Jesse Marsch pressured Alphonso Davies to play because it was a big match against the United States, and Alphonso Davies decided to do it even though maybe he knew he wasn't 100%. And he goes on to say Alphonso is not the kind of guy to say no in those moments. He ended up playing, and look what happened. Right? And there's another article The Athletic has, because again, they've done a tremendous job covering this story, where he says that Davies was pressured to start the game. He is the captain, a young man who wants to help his team, but it was borderline. And this is a real gray area, obviously. Like, at what point do you cross the line of he just really wants to play and maybe somebody needs to stop him from playing, to the coach is actually putting that extra pressure on him to play? I mean, obviously, Jesse Marsch, Alphonso Davies, and everybody else don't want Alphonso Davies to put himself in a bad position where he goes out against the U.S. and makes the injury worse, is the prevailing sentiment in this situation, that he goes out there, makes the injury worse, tears his ACL, and now what? You've got your star player a year and 100 days out from the World Cup, right? Down there holding his knee and having blown out his ACL. He's going to have to spend half the time before the World Cup rehabbing and getting himself ready to be able to play, maybe even more than that. Right? And so this could have very wide, long-reaching ramifications for Canada. So you don't want to end up in that situation. But it's so difficult. It's very easy in hindsight, knowing that his knee was apparently structurally compromised in some way, to the point that he then went out there and tore his ACL against the United States. Hindsight's it's easy to go back and say, and maybe it's more comfortable to try and blame somebody else. Because Alphonso Davies is the captain of Canada. Of course he wants to play the match against the U.S. Right? You aren't this high of a you aren't at this high a level as a competitor if you don't want to do that. And really, I think the best conversation is saying Canada probably should have had somebody that can come in and say, look, we did some tests on your knee. We're not 100% confident you're going to be safe if you play this game. Wrap it up, chill for a week or two, and put it in an ice bath, and then your knee will be okay again. The swelling goes down, whatever. But that didn't happen. And now accusations are flying around that maybe Jesse Marsch was pressuring him. That's tough. And I wonder what Alphonso Davies thinks. I mean, I wonder how tight the communication is with Nadal Hussein about this. You know, is this coming from Alphonso Davies? Is this just Nadal Hussein trying to protect their friend and their client with these types of quotes and trying to do what they think is best? I don't know. But if this is what Alphonso Davies is thinking, that's a problem. But how does Bayern fit in all this? Well, Bayern's issue isn't necessarily with that, although they are concerned with the fact that Alphonso Davies went out to play that second match, and they are throwing around some accusations that, no. Their biggest issue is actually with something else. Jan Christian Driesen, who's the chief executive officer of Bayern, said sending an obviously injured player with a damaged knee on a 12-hour intercontinental flight without a thorough medical examination is, in our view, grossly negligent and a clear violation of medical due diligence, and that they reserve the right to take legal action and have demanded, obviously, as I said, a full investigation from Canada Soccer. That is right to me. Because the craziest thing about this story isn't this debate about whether he was pressured into playing or he wanted to play or somebody should have stopped him from playing. It's the fact that he got all the way to Bayern and they didn't know his ACL was torn. How the hell is that possible? You shouldn't be going through all of the rigors of travel and getting all the way back to Germany if you have a serious injury that has not been inspected yet. The Canadian national team's always been a little weird. It went bankrupt a few years ago, right after it started playing super well. Right? So it is not a federation that has been totally absolved of problems. And honestly, few are. But having your star player go down with an injury in consecutive matches and not doing the medical due diligence to figure out what is actually wrong with him. I mean, a torn ACL is not that hard to find. All right, you just crank on the MRI machine and you can see it pretty quickly, right? Couple days at the most, right? With the imaging that you would hope is available for a top-level national team, you're hoping you could do better than that. There are also field tests that could say, ooh, we're concerned. I know, I've torn my ACL. I've had the field test done. I've done the MRI, right? There are ways to tell. And to be honest, Alphonso Davies he's never torn his ACL before. You can feel it. Your knee feels loose, and it doesn't stop feeling loose. That's the best way to describe it. And so he probably knew something was up too. I'd imagine maybe he told somebody about it. And I would agree with Jan Christian Driesen that maybe there is some sort of legal pursuit that they could undergo here because they're incredibly valuable asset. One of their star players got hurt, and there is a certain level of trust and I'm assuming a certain agreement between national teams and club teams that you're going to take care of the player and provide adequate medical care. And I don't know if that was done here. I'm not saying the doctors on Canada did a bad job. I'm just saying somebody in charge should have been like, yeah, we need to check this out more. We need to actually figure out what's going on here and not just package him onto a 12-hour flight with a busted knee for Bayern to just discover that when they opened the box, the toy was broken when it shipped. That's a crazy situation to be in.